Have you ever wondered when or why you should black and white images when it comes to editing? Well, in this video, I have 5 simple tips that'll kind of help you along and give you a bit of a guide into your editing journey. My name is Pi, and I'm one of the founders of Lynn and Jersa Photography and SLRLounge.com. We're teaming up with Adorama to bring you a new series of photography tutorials called Master Your Craft right here on Adorama TV. So let's dive in. What's up, friends? My name is Pi. Welcome to Adorama TV. If you know me, you know I like to get straight into things. I have a bunch of images loaded up. I'm inside of Lightroom Classic, but honestly, if you just kind of follow along, that's enough. There's no exercise files, nothing to download. This is just a simple guide, and I'm not going to say that it's comprehensive. I'm not going to say that in every one of these cases, you should black and white your images, except that I am. I'm just kidding. This is just a simple guide. It's a couple tips to help you know when black and whiting is really going to be a great option. And in some cases, I'll let you know when I think it might be your best option. Let's get right into it. We're going to start with number 1, when you're working with images that could be considered timeless. Now, what I mean is when you look at any of these images, and I created virtual copies so you can kind of see as we create a black and white version. In any of these examples, if I select all 3, you'll notice that there's nothing about them that would distinctly say when it might have been shot. They could have been shot in any time and age, right? So when something's timeless, it's a moment, it's an emotion, it's a shot that really doesn't have a distinct time. It's timeless. Now, what would give something kind of a timestamp? Well, I would say if you're photographing like a particular car, or if it's something that, an iPhone, something that everybody knows, it's not going to be like an old timeless type shot, right? But in these cases, once I apply, so let's do this. I'm in Lightroom Classic, and again, you guys can just follow along. All I'm going to do is to each of these images, I'll apply a look, so that way you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. So in the develop module, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to use the black and white mixer from Visual Flow. You can use whatever presets you like, but this will help me to get to quick, different black and white looks and kind of show you what I mean. If I were to apply the bold portrait cinematic look, this is going to apply this kind of bold, high contrast vibe where you look at this image and with a bit of grain, with a bit of this kind of vibe, you have no clue when it was actually shot. This could have been shot like 50, 60 years ago, right? Same thing, if I were to select this image and let's say we're going to select the classic portrait mix, again, this dress and the scene that we're in, it could fit in any decade. And this one's just for good measure because I got to throw my cute baby girl into every tutorial that I make. But once again, when you look at this, like nothing on her in terms of clothing or stylistically is telling us that it was shot at any particular time, so it looks like it could be timeless. And this is exactly what I mean when it comes to timeless. An image that, well, it works and it feels as though it could be shot at any point in time. Okay, so look for cool emotions, look for, something that might be journalistic, look for those types of timeless moments. Number 2, I would say when you have bad color or no color, it's a good idea to go black and white. And in this case, so in this particular scene, we honestly could keep it color and we could make adjustments and whatnot. But the simple fix in a scene like this, where you have a bunch of blue light, I'm doing a shutter drag on this. And so we have a bunch of light that's kind of landing over their faces, is just to go straight to like a bold portrait sort of look. And if that's too much, I'll go back to classic portrait and we'll go right there. So once you're here, really the color doesn't matter anymore and you get to a really cool and dynamic image either way. So that works. This is another example where I'm shooting right in front of a tinted window. So the window's actually green. And once again, I could correct for that, but this is an example of a scene that really doesn't have a lot of color to begin with. So even when I press W and I get a white balance reading off the chair, there's not a ton of color in this scene. So I can again apply a black and white look, go ahead and just adjust the contrast and the exposure, and we get to a really nice place where the image has a really great and polished feel, despite in color, it really doesn't. Like when you look side by side at these, it distinctly looks better as a black and white image. Another time is like an image like this one. I actually shot this for a tutorial. If it's not up yet, it will be up on the channel, but this is where we're using a gobo. So there's a Westcott gobo snoot, the optical snoot that's creating this pattern on the wall. In this kind of a scene, there's really not any color other than just his skin tone. So once again, we don't really have any color in this scene. And these are perfect examples of when a black and white effect would really be kind of cool on an image. And by the way, you can always just hit V to black and white an image as well, just to use the standard black and white conversion. When you use like a preset, you're gonna get, more than just the standard conversion basically. Okay, number 3 would be when you want to emphasize the light quality or the light texture in a scene. So here's some examples. This is one with my daughter looking out. This is my older daughter. And as she looks out the window, I love the light quality. It's kind of like wrapping on the face and falling in a shadow. So when I apply the black and white look, and again, for an image like this, I'd probably reduce contrast a little bit. I really love the focus on light quality that the image takes on. This is another example where we get a bit of texture in our lighting. So this texture, and what I mean by that is these patterns of light in an image. Here, the sunlight is not only kind of shooting this shadow onto the wall from this tree, but it's also revealing a bit of texture in the white wall. And we have these really great black shadows with lines that are coming through. So as soon as I go to, like, say, a bold portrait look or a classic portrait look, we get these really great sort of images where we emphasize the texture of a photograph. And I could leave this here, reduce contrast, whatever you want to do, but I like, in a scene like this especially, I would keep it like this hard edged and leave it with a sort of bold look. I think it looks really cool. This is another good example of a scene that has really beautiful lighting, good texture. There's texture on the wall, there's beautiful light wrapping, and there's also beautiful texture on like dress and details, right? And I'm kind of mixing two things. I'm really talking lighting, texture, but we can also think of like patterns and textures. But in this case, once again, a black and white look looks absolutely fantastic with an image like this. And I just kind of darken a little bit. Usually what I would end up doing for a shot like this too, is I'll apply a little bit of a radial filter, like right over the subject that I want to focus in on. So I'm gonna apply it right over her and then rotate and just pull down the exposure a little bit, okay? Look at how beautifully that just kind of pulls in the attention, and it lets us focus in on the emotion, the expression, and the quality of light of this kind of a photograph. Could you go black and white or color in these scenes? Absolutely. These are all scenes that would work both ways. But the black and white in each of these kind of has this effect where it helps us to focus in on the light quality and the light texture, which is really nice. So the only thing so far, when it comes to like these timeless images, these obviously have worked both ways, right? I like the color versions of these images. I'm just selecting all the images, by the way, and pressing N if you want to get to that survey view. I like the color, and we'll click this one off just so we don't see this one, these two. So we can see it's a little larger. But I also like the black and white for these. So these aren't cases where I would say, you should black and white. It's just an option. In the case of like bad color or no color, I do feel like oftentimes the black and white will actually end up looking better, especially when we look at like an image like this, or we look at these two. There's not really much need for the color in this dance portrait, right? So as a black and white, it lets us really focus in on the story, the shapes, the light, everything else about it, as opposed to the distraction of just the skin tone. Let's go to number 4. When you want to emphasize shapes and patterns, and before anyone wigs out, she's fully clothed. It's just the light and the bokeh in this shot. It looks sort of implied. Her clothes are kind of like skin color too, but fully. This isn't another tutorial. We'll cover this. Anyway, in this case, we're talking shapes and patterns. I have 3 different examples. In 2 of these examples, it's kind of the shape and the pattern that is in the scene, right? In this example, it's the shape and pattern that's being made by the body. In these cases, once again, color can kind of be a little bit of a distraction. So if I flip this over to, let's say, a bold black and white, maybe a cinematic black and white, let's go for this. Any of these kind of black and white looks, we get to a really great image where we can kind of focus in just on the shapes that are being created. And again, on the texture that's kind of on this water droplets in the scene. I really like that. And when you compare this to, look at this, when you compare that to the color, there's not a whole lot of reason to keep an image like that in color, right? Same thing here. This image is fine in color, but again, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this, let's do bold cinematic landscape, or let's test and see which one we like better. Okay, I'm gonna do the bold cinematic landscape, okay? What I'm gonna do is actually pull the highlights up and pull the whites up. And this allows me to really emphasize the kind of difference in contrast. I'm going to bring the blacks down, bring the shadows down, okay? And just so both these images don't have like strong vignettes, I'm going to remove the vignettes from these. Now, I'm going to select both images, press C, and I'm going to adjust this to a crop where both of them, we're kind of comparing apples to apples. And I want to just focus in on the shapes of this sand. Okay, so let's pull it up to about here without any of the other stuff. Okay, and let's add a bit more contrast to this. A bit more contrast, and I'm going to just turn it down a little bit in terms of the overall exposure, so we get a little more of that kind of the texture to kind of reveal. Again, when you look at these two images, so side by side, the black and white allows us to really focus in on the texture, on the shapes, on the light, on all the other details of the image, as opposed to color, which again would work, but it has a little bit of a different feel, doesn't it? This is one other example of an image where both these images aren't, like, this is quite an atrocious picture. It's not anything good. The funny thing is that when I actually turn this image into like a black and white, so if I were to do like, say, the bold landscape cinematic, as soon as it becomes a black and white, suddenly it has interest to me. Like, I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of cool. I like the texture, I like all this, but this is by no means like, do I think that this is a good shot or anything? It's just, as a black and white, yeah, it looks pretty interesting. In fact, if I give these both, again, the same crop, and then we were to look at them side by side, look at how funny that is. As soon as this is a black and white, suddenly there's a sort of value in it. We see this texture, we see detail. Whereas, you know, in its color version, it's kind of just a little bit wah-wah, not really that great. When it comes to shapes and patterns, this is kind of what I mean with black and white. It really allows the viewer to focus in and think of, in these instances, you're kind of removing a distraction. We don't necessarily want them to think of color, although you could probably process each of these images to work. Maybe not really this one. The other two, you could make it work in some maybe like warm toward color. I do feel like black and white works better in these instances, okay? The last one is when you want to accentuate detail. So if you want to accentuate detail, black and white, once again, can remove the distraction of color. So let's look at both of these. And this is an image that would work both ways, so I'm not going to say it's going to be only one. I'm going to apply the bold portrait look, and I'm going to brighten this up. Now, as a black and white image, do you see how you kind of focus in on just the detail of the image, right? You look at both these side by side, if they're both even blown up, it's kind of wild. Like, for some reason, not seeing the color really allows us to focus in on the actual detail of the shot. Same thing here. This is of my son, my oldest, who's getting a nice dose of water. You know what's funny? I made a video of this that went onto TikTok, and it was under the Born Uncreative, now it's the @LeonardJersa account, but it got pulled because it broke community guidelines. I never figured out why. They never told me why. I assume they think that I was doing something unsafe with my children, but this is just a water balloon, which apparently is unsafe. Anyway, when you look at this in color, again, it's cool in color, but you better focus on the detail of the texture when it's in black and white. One other great example of this too that I wanted to show is when it comes to, say, wedding portraits, especially with Indian brides who have a lot of detail in their henna, in their jewelry, in their wardrobe. There's so much crazy detail there. So when this is flipped again to like this kind of classic portrait black and white, notice how the detail, and what I often do in these cases, if I want someone to pay close attention to detail, and by the way, I'm going to show you, for those that made it this far into this video, it's not that far, it's like 15 minutes, come on. But if you made it here, I'm going to give you a little bonus tip, and you can comment and tell me if you got the bonus tip. But look, at the top, I have these tools under the Visual Flow Toolkit. Detail minus, this subtracts out detail on close-up portraits. Now, you might not have the presets, right? But I'm going to give you the settings. So I'm going to click it, and look, all we're doing is reducing texture by 10, clarity by 20, dehaze by -5, and we're adjusting noise reduction up. And the effect that just had is, look at the before versus the after. It automatically smooths and softens skin on your close-up portraits. Cool? I'm going to give you one other tip. Watch this. We're going to grab a radial burn. This is just a standard radial burn. Press Shift M, and I'm placing it over the detail of the jewelry I'm gonna rotate, and I'm gonna pull down the exposure of everywhere that's not the detail. Now I'm gonna raise the exposure in this area, or raise the overall exposure. So basically what's happening is everything else is getting darker except for the detail in the hands. And what this allows us to do is sort of create an image where everything is a little bit darker than the detail that we're trying to reveal. I'm gonna raise the highlights, raise the white points a bit, raise the shadows, the blacks. And with that, I'm not gonna go back and adjust clarity up because that's gonna affect skin tone too, right? So what I'm gonna do is this, another freebie. Go down and I have this option down here called tattoos and body art. I've never shown you this one. Okay, what you're gonna do is select a brush, press K, and if you don't have the presets, again, just dial in these settings, and I'm actually gonna paint that right over the henna. Okay, all you really need with this brush is just a bit of clarity. I'm subtracting a little bit of texture because it's for skin. So I don't want the pores of the skin to be highlighted. I want the kind of details of, you know, all the other stuff. And I can apply this to the jewelry too. I'm gonna go up here, fingers. Okay. Now just looking at this, I'm gonna do one last thing. I'm gonna create a mask and pull this linear gradient. I thought it'd be fun to do like a little final bonus edit for those that stuck around. Okay, I'm gonna pull it down by 0.6 on the left side of the image. So it really just kind of draws attention into the right. Now look at this. The color version of the image is great. And this would totally work if I were to, you know, adjust it, make preset, whatever. But when you see the black and white version of this, it kind of fits almost everything that we discussed in this video, right? We have the lighting quality, we have a timeless moment, we have detail, we have all those things that we want to emphasize, texture, everything. And I absolutely love the black and white over the color in an instance like this. I'm done. I'm gonna wrap this up with a little bit of a summary. So black and white is a great option when you're working with images that could be timeless, when you have bad color or no color, when you want to emphasize light quality or light texture, when you want to, well, really reveal shapes and patterns in a scene, or when you want to accentuate detail. If you guys dug the tutorial, let me know. You guys can tell Adorama and YouTube that I'm doing a good job by giving it a thumbs up, and comment below. If you like part 1, I've loaded up a little black and white part 2. I might come back and do some more because this wasn't a full comprehensive guide. I hope y'all enjoyed. I'd love to see you guys back here same time, same place next week. So subscribe so you're notified. Y'all can follow me also at PyJersa, and I'll see y'all next time.